The Habs have finally made a signing that could be a key player in the future as Oliver Kapanen signed to a 3-year deal. We'll get into the details of what that means for his future with the Montreal Canadiens. Plus, on a recent episode of the Gosse and Jesse podcast, Arber said he believes the Habs could very much move up to pick Cole Eiserman in the draft. That plus some other rumors about the 26th pick coming up on this episode of Habs Digest. And without further ado, we're going to jump straight into it. And according to Arber and Jesse, the Habs are likely going to trade the 26th overall pick. Now, we mentioned this a little bit in the recent Athletic mock draft where Arber kind of said that in his portion there. But on the recent Gosse and Jesse show, which you guys should go check out, I'll put the link down below for that. The whole thing is fantastic. A lot of this stuff happens at just about the hour mark, but we're going to get into some of the stuff he said. And the first thing, Jesse, he said, I would put the odds of picking at 26 at 75%, or the odds of not picking at 26, that should say, at 75%. He said they won't be picking at 26 in the draft, I don't think. A lot of things need to fit, but I'd be pretty surprised if the Canadiens walked up on stage in Vegas and made that 26th pick in the draft. That would surprise me. So forgive me writing the odds of picking at 26. The odds of not picking are 75%. So to hear, he's quite certain, Jesse, he has this air of confidence about him there. And we know Kent Hughes is looking to make a trade. That's no secret. We know he's calling around and he's probably not going to trade the 5th pick, but that 26th is just, it's a really juicy pick in a draft that has the solid prospects this deep. Are you in agreement that you think like this could be extremely likely that the Habs make this kind of move?
Not only would it be likely, but I think it would be a very smart move for the Montreal Canadiens. And let me explain why. Like, we have so many very good prospects, but I put them more in that B tier, right? What this Montreal Canadiens team definitely needs is those more A-level tier prospects, right? And at this draft, we absolutely get an opportunity to do that, right? And especially considering like the found money that we have and that other additional first-round pick, 26 overall, from the Winnipeg Jets. Thank you, Sean Monahan, once again. The gift that keeps on giving as a boy, always. You know, it's like, it really makes sense to do this because for me, when I'm thinking about this, Josh, it's like having a deep prospect pool is great. But wouldn't you agree that there's like a certain point where you get too many prospects where it's almost like they start stepping on each other's toes? Like it's can almost hurt your prospect pool at a certain point because you could block out other potentially good players just because your system is so jam-packed that you could miss out on some potentially good players just because you don't have as much runway for them. And we know if there's one thing you need for prospects, if there's one thing we've learned from doing this pod and studying prospects, is that you need to give these young players time, right, to really develop, give them the space to grow, so to speak, right? We can't have that forest being too filled, right? We still need that space to kind of grow. So I feel like really by trading this 26 overall pick, you know, obviously we know where we have lots already on defense. It makes a lot of sense, like just the punctuate of it, of like getting rid of like where we have too much. And then we have so many B-level prospects. Maybe, you know, even though you can obviously maybe get a good player, then packaging that to then kind of maximize this opportunity of really getting a star player obviously makes a lot of sense to me.
I think that's actually a really good point. Like the value you could maybe get in a trade with that 26 pick, especially considering how many prospects you have in your system that objectively, in terms of value to the Habs, are probably lower than for a lot of other teams, right? Like a B-tier prospect in the Habs system, or like even someone like a Harris or a Barrett, who we'll get into in a bit. One of those guys for the Habs is worth less than they would be for another team. Maybe same thing with the 26th pick because you only have a certain number of roster spots, and with the signing today that we'll get into in a bit, they're now at, I think, 42 out of 50 already, and they still have a bunch of guys to sign for the roster, and there's a lot of different stuff they have to get going, but I think you're bang on the money. I think that 26th pick, there's a lot of good prospects, whether it's a Cole Hudson, a Michael Hage, Jet Lachenko, people are saying could move up, as Marc-Antoine Gaudin said in the podcast. Like, there's guys there other teams are going to want. So I think this is very interesting. But, Jesse, Arber actually had a specific player maybe in mind when he was saying moving the 26th pick. And I missed this. I didn't see this anywhere else. And again, I recommend you go check out what they said on the podcast. But Arber kind of said that he thinks that the Habs could be moving up for Cole Eiserman. Now, this is speculation, and he makes it known as such, but this is the feeling he gets, and I'll show you the quote that he had. So, he basically said that, quite frankly, the Canadiens taking Cole Eiserman out for dinner, to me, that's a tell that they're considering trying to move into a range where Cole Eiserman could make some sense. And he went on to say that if they're able to use 26 and some other assets to get into a range where Eiserman's falling in the draft, and they have a trade on the back burner with another team, to me, that's what that dinner invite was probably more geared towards getting information on. maybe to get information on, hey, so who's been scouting you, Cole? Like, who have you been talking to? Hey, do we like you? Do we not? And of course, Jesse, we have that infamous quote where we weren't so happy with the way he responded to a question of why he'd be good for the Habs. Just, I score a lot of goals. You have to score a lot of goals to win. But apparently teams were impressed that he was self-aware. And even Cole Eiserman himself said, like, I know I got to get better on defense. And he said, other teams actually thought better of me than I did of myself on certain skills. So that potential might be there. I know we have our concerns, Jesse, and I know you love Cole Eiserman. So this is probably music to your ears. Do you think this is something Kent Hughes is aiming towards? Because Arben seems to think so, and I didn't even think of this until I saw this, but it actually kind of makes a ton of sense if they can do it.
It's giving me Ricky Bobby type of vibes there. If you're not first, you're last, kind of thing like that. But I like it, right? We know that this player, like, I feel like with Cole Eiserman, he's the type of guy that can score 50 goals in the NHL.
Possible.
The only question is, like, is he just going to be too concentrated on that, right? But we see, like, we have a recent history with the Montreal Canadiens of another guy named Cole Caufield, right? Of goal scorer. But now this past season, we saw we're able to shape around his game and really kind of round it out, right? You have to feel if you're able, again, another young American sniper, you got to feel like you'd be able to do the same thing with Cole Eiserman there. And I would agree that it's like, definitely there's parts of his game that need to improve, but I'm really liking, for me, it's music to my ears. And I think they can't use in Xhekaj as well. I think it's huge the fact that he's saying he knows what he needs to improve on, because you can work with a player like that. If they know, well, you got some common ground, right? You can establish that player, you can develop that player much further, So honestly, we're hearing the right things. Obviously, we know how much the culture is so important to Montreal Canadiens, but I have confidence in that, like, to be able to do that with this player. But you got to take those opportunities sometimes if you feel like it's there, because obviously this player does have just so much potential.
He really does. And there's some interesting stuff with him, right? I mean, by all accounts, he's an incredibly confident guy, very confident in his skills. It kind of sucks having to draft him now, because I feel like, well, I mean, that's just me saying, oh, I mean, it sucks to have to draft him at 18 before we know what he's going to be. But I think next year in college, it's going to be such a telltale sign of what's going to happen. But look, obviously you pick NHL players before they go to college, like almost always, right? So it's like, it's not a real complaint by me, but next season, when he goes to the NCAA and he works with the staff at university, it's like, that's when we're really going to see it. And I think there's a lot of potential, but let us know down below what you think. Because I think if he's falling in the draft, and you can move up into the teens and snag him by trading, like, someone like a Harris, someone like a Kovacevic, maybe not, probably not, but even someone like, I don't know about Mesar, who knows, right? And you combine that with a 26 overall pick, you might be able to sneak up a little bit. So we'll have to wait and see, but I think it's a very interesting proposition. But Jesse, we got to talk about a guy who's already with the Canadiens, and they finally did it. They finally signed Oliver Kapanen. This is what we've all been waiting for after his dominant World Championship performance. Jesse, the Montreal Canadiens have agreed to terms on a 3-year entry-level contract for forward Oliver Kapanen. And if we take a look at his contract structure there, he gets an $832,000 salary, $92,500 signing bonus. He's very happy. Using Puckpedia now, the cap friendly is going to be gone in a few weeks. So go follow Puckpedia on Twitter. And Jesse, I mean, his World Championship performance was just absolutely insane, right? The 6 goals in 8 games. For international hockey, he's been so good. And that dominant 14 points in 13 games in the Liga at his age has been unreal to witness. Kapanen now, locking him up now is fantastic. So he can go to Habs training camp. If he makes the Habs roster, he can stay. And if not, he goes back to Sweden, but he still gets all his money. This is the Habs doing very good by him, rewarding him for that World Championship performance. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do. I mean, I highly doubt he makes the Habs at a training camp because there's just too much competition. But he's going to be in North America no matter what next year, Jesse. He is one guy that just almost came out of nowhere that so he's one of the most exciting prospects the Habs have, I think.
And this is such a great depth move, and potentially even more for this Montreal Canadiens team. We're by looking at the Stanley Cup final this year, Florida Panthers, everything else, like how important depth is. And when I see a guy like Oliver Kapanen, as soon as he's here with the Montreal Canadiens, I want him on PP2 in front of the net, tipping shots, just like how we saw. Like, this guy has some offensive upside besides just playing a complete game. Like, this guy is doing everything he needs to do to cement his spot in the NHL. He totally deserves this contract. It's amazing to see. My question to you, Josh, is now that this is done, who do you like better at that 3C spot? Do you like Owen, Beck, or Oliver Kapanen? I also want to hear from our viewers as well.
Oh, boy. Well, I think Owen Beck for now, just because I feel like his pedigree there is a bit better. I think he projects better on the dot. And it's not that Kapanen's bad. He actually has had some really good stints on the dot. I think that Kapanen probably projects as more of a point getter, but I actually think it's kind of similar. I mean, Kapanen has proven that he can score at the highest level in the Liga, and he's going to Sweden this year with Timrå, and he played amazing in the World Championships. He's able to get goals, he's able to get assists. Owen Beck is like, a solid OHL point getter, but the thing is, Owen Beck's complete 200-foot game is probably better than Kapanen. So I think that well-roundedness fares better for Owen Beck, and his IQ, both of them are very smart players. I think I would still lean Owen Beck at this point, just because I trust his full 200-foot game better. But I gotta say, like, it wouldn't completely shock me if Kapanen ends up being the better player long term. I don't think it's likely. I'd still probably say 75-25 Owen Beck, if not even higher. But yeah, I feel like I'm more confident in Beck. What about you?
Yeah, well, that's why I bring it up, right? It's a tough call because in some ways they play a similar type of game, of a style of hockey that I really, really like. Really smart, defensive, able to win draws, good on the drop, but like at the dot, but you got to feel like there's some offensive upside. It's just which of these two players really gonna unlock that first? I don't know. Just what we're seeing, like, I feel like they're both doing what they need to do. Obviously, Owen Beck was phenomenal, especially the second half of this past season. And Oliver Kapanen, like the way that he finished in the playoffs there again, the 14 points, 13 games, like playing so well in the men's league. Like for me, he's got some underrated skills, like amazing hands, amazing hand-eye. So I feel like you mentioned, like Kapanen, I could see maybe maxing out at a little bit more point production. But again, with what Owen Beck's able to provide on both sides of the ice, that's tremendously valuable. I see both of these players as being winning hockey type of guys.
That's exactly it. And they're both guys that I think the Habs are thrilled to have in their organization. I mean, that's what you always want to have happen. It's one of your prospects that you kind of underrate, kind of comes out of nowhere and shows flashes of greatness. So while, again, I still think Owen Beck's probably the better prospect, I think there's a world where Kapanen ends up being better. But who knows? They're going to have to compete against each other. I think Owen Beck's arguably more NHL ready, but who knows? Like, it's so interesting to see these guys, and we'll probably see some stuff at training camp where they can go head to head. And I mean, I don't know, the Habs are in such a fun position that it doesn't matter who ends up being better. We can debate all we want, but one of these guys I would say is for sure going to make the NHL, and hey, it's going to be a ton of fun to witness. Let us know down below which one you would prefer. I think it's probably Beck, but Kapanen, I think, is winning a lot of people's hearts. But that'll do it for this episode of Habs Digest. If you enjoyed, leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Thank you everyone for helping us past 12,500 subs. 13,000 is next, so if you haven't hit sub, hit it now. We'd really appreciate it. I've been your host, Josh Gotts, my co-host, Jesse Poirier. We'll catch you in the next one.